So I'm Katie Doherty, the President and CEO of the Kennebec Valley Chamber. Thank you for joining us this morning for our weekly Chamber Connect via Zoom meeting. Feel free to submit any questions throughout the presentation in the chat box. If you did submit questions beforehand, we will cover those as well at the end of the presentation. This video will be recorded as well and will be a future reference for you on our website. So feel free to keep that in mind as well and share with other people if they have questions throughout this. Today we are joined by Amy Bassett, who has been appointed as the District Director of SBA's Maine District Office in January of 2017. The district office is located in Augusta with branch offices in Bangor and in Portland. In her role as District Director, Ms. Bassett is responsible for leading the Maine SBA team in the delivery of the SBA's financial assistance, which right now her job is a lot harder than it was before. So this morning, I'd like to turn it over to Amy, who will go over the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and the Payroll Protection Program, giving you a little overview, but then also having some times for the end for questions. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Amy.
Great, thank you, Katie, and I appreciate this opportunity. And yes, thank you for that acknowledgement that my team and myself included are quite busy, but really we're happy to be able to do this to help people because we know so many businesses are struggling and there have been so many federal programs that have now become available in a short period of time, and they can be really impactful to Maine businesses. So we want to do our part and get the word out and help people understand the options and try to navigate as best we can. So we are happy to be busy because that means we're trying to help people, and that's what we're here for. So to kind of set the stage and dial back the timeline a little bit, this all sort of from our seats at SBA in Maine started kind of happening back in late February. And as we kind of go through the timeline, you'll see that SBA kind of acknowledges that as well. So this, the impact on businesses from the COVID-19 really started back then, and then it just sort of escalated, and then it just escalated really rapidly as, conditions deteriorated and as, businesses were forced to close and that type of thing. So in Maine, the first program that did become available was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And that became available back on March 17th. And in order to get that declaration, the state, the governor's office, and the Department of Economic and Community Development worked really closely with our office and the chambers and everybody to pull together enough information to get SBA what we needed in order to make that declaration. So Maine did it first. Maine was actually the first state in the country to get that declaration. So those loans became available back on March 17th. Since that time, shortly thereafter, every other state in the nation got this declaration. So if you just think about the magnitude of businesses trying to apply for this program, it became countrywide right away. So it's a lot. And it became a lot of volume, became a lot of questions. And anybody who had applied back then knows that the process was a little more laborious. There was more forms required. So one thing that we want to make clear is that if a business did apply back then in the early time frame, we want to make sure that you got the word to reapply once the CARES Act passed, which was March 27th, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a second. So we want to make sure that everyone did apply when the Economic Injury Disaster Loan advance was available. That advance is what you've been hearing about, is up to $10,000 of the EIDL that may be forgiven. So that became an option under the CARES Act. So people were forced to reapply in order to get that access to that option. And what that option is it's based on the number of employees. So it's $1,000 per employee. And then when you make that application, SBA will process that alongside the EIDL request, and that amount up to $10,000 may be forgiven. And we've already heard that SBA is working to get those advances out. We do know there's still a long queue for the EIDL applications. We recognize that. Locally, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to check on those applications, but we can refer customers to the customer service desk and the website address for that. Before I go too much further, I want to provide you a local number to call. Our office in Maine the number is 622-8551, and that's the best place to call in Maine, where you're reaching the district office, my team in Maine. And while we may not have the answer, we'll do our best to direct you to the place that you can get that answer. So I won't go into all the details of EIDL, but just know that that program is really designed to help address the business's working capital needs during the disaster and in the future until the time when it can recover. This is a nuanced program. We get a lot of questions about, I go to the site and I can't even enter a loan amount. It's not the way it's designed. How it's designed is it captures that information, and with the information you're submitting, SBA is determining what your working capital need is and ultimately what the loan amount will be. The loan there's no cost to apply. You can, if approved, you have up to 6 months to decide if you even want to take the loan. And then if you take the loan and the funds are dispersed, it comes with an automatic 12-month deferment of payment. So you don't have to make a payment for 12 months from when that loan closes. These are some very flexible options, and the program is designed to recognize that businesses, it could take quite a while till they start seeing recovery. And we know a lot of people don't want to take on additional debt, but this can be a great program for some businesses, and we want to be sure people have the flexibility that they're not saddled with a debt payment right away when they still haven't really recovered. Some of the working capital needs that can be addressed would be payroll, but you might want to rethink that when I start talking about the PPP program, but bills that are due, utilities, rent, debt payments that you have now can't be used to refinance debt, but it could be used to make debt payments. The terms on these loans, it's a fixed interest rate at 3.75%, and the term is up to 30 years. So it can be a quite affordable payment, given that those terms are really pretty aggressive in this kind of an environment. So that's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan EIDL and the loan advance. But what happened with the CARES Act, which passed back on March 27th when the president signed it, one of the provisions for SBA in that act was the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is when that became available, and even before it became available, businesses recognized that this was going to be something that really could help them out. And we started getting flooded with inquiries about this program, and so did our banks, because the one thing that I want to make sure we're clear about is with the Paycheck Protection Program, while you get information and some forms off the web, you're not directly applying to SBA. You're applying at your bank, at your credit union, or a local lender. This is the access point for that program. While you can get the form online, and the two best websites to get official forms and information is www.sba.gov/paycheck protection or treasury.gov/cares. There's a lot of misinformation flying around out there. There's a lot of scams. So please be sure that you're going to these websites to get the accurate and correct information. This program, when you think about, I've worked for the government for a very long time, and when you think about the magnitude of the PPP program, so it was signed off on March 27th, and it's $350 billion in this program. And we were told to stand this up and make it available and open on April 3rd. So in that window of time, SBA did it. We were taking applications through our banks on April 3rd. In order to do that, it has to be a little bit flexible and a little bit fluid. Fluid is a word we have to use way too often, I'm sorry to say, and more details to come are words we're using way too often, but that is the reality. There is really a great amount of information already out there, but I know people have a lot of fine-tuned, detailed questions, and we're doing our best with those, but there are definitely, as recent as last night, we had some additional details roll out. So I just want to make everybody aware of that, and we are doing our best, as are our partners, to get the word out. So again, just to set the stage of what has happened with that program, since April 3rd in Maine, and this data is only through the end of April 13th, so 10 days, in Maine, 10,889 PPP loans have been approved by our lenders in Maine. That was done through 98 lenders for a total dollar amount of about $1.7 billion. So in a week, less than a week, no, wait, I'm really bad with math. Sorry, my brain is tired. In about 10 days, we did almost 11,000 loans in Maine. So it has been working. Our lenders have embraced it. Our banks, our credit unions have jumped on board, and we've worked closely with the chambers. We've worked closely with the Bankers Association and the Credit Union League to get the word out. And banks have stepped up and credit unions have stepped up in a big time way. And the benefit of this program, and what I like to stress, is it is really designed to keep businesses afloat and help workers get paid. That's why it's called the Paycheck Protection Program, Paycheck Protection Program, because when the benefit to this program is the loan, the whole loan or a portion of the loan may be forgiven. It's not a grant, it's a loan that has a forgivable component to it. But in order to maximize the forgiveness, you have to focus the payment of the proceeds on payroll costs. So technically speaking, up to 75% of the loan proceeds must go to payroll costs in order to maximize your forgiveness. And again, I know there's some nuanced questions to this about the timelines and things like that, and I'm happy to answer those questions, but that is the overarching guideline for that program. Those proceeds can be used for other purposes, but if you want to maximize the forgiveness, the bulk of it has to go for the payment of payroll costs. There are a couple other aspects of the the CARES Act that I wanted to mention, and this is just in the SBA space. So there was provision fundings in there for if someone has an existing SBA loan through their bank or a certified development company. So if you have a 7A loan guaranteed by SBA through a bank or credit union, if you have a 504 loan that you access through a bank and a certified development company, or if you have a microloan through one of our microloan intermediaries, there was funding in the CARES Act to make 6 months worth of payments on those loans. More details to come on that, but I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of other benefits that were in the CARES Act as well. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I think rather than me just talking about the details, Katie, I'll put it back to you, and maybe we can sort of have it a little more conversational, answer some questions at this point.
Yeah, so let me pull some questions that got submitted ahead of time. Let's see. So a big question that keeps popping up is what federal programs can help self-employed people? So one example is landlords. Since rental income is unearned income and not like wages, that income or lack thereof during this crisis should be addressed, as landlords have expenses that do not get forgiven when the state has stopped any evictions or non-payment. Landlords do not wish to evict, but what help is available for landlords to keep their property ownership from being threatened?
Yeah, this question has come up a lot in our office. And the thing with the PPP program is it's under our regular lending loan guarantee umbrella. This one is a lot different though. We're actually guaranteeing 100% of these loans to the bank. in order to be able to get them to make them in a comfortable fashion. And we've expedited a lot of things, but there still are some rules that are kind of counterintuitive to our regular program. And this is one of them that we're seeking further clarification on, because in our regular programs, we cannot guarantee loans to passive businesses. So I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer on that, but I'll circle back with you, Katie, when we do get that.
Okay, yep, I know who submitted the question, so I can make sure I get the answer to them. Let's see. So the next question is, their business was established in February of 2019, and 2019 taxes haven't been completed yet. Is this person eligible for the SBA assistance?
So yes, the threshold is a business is eligible if it was in operation on February 15th, 2020 and has 500 or fewer employees. That's the high level eligibility. And correct, they were not required to file federal or state taxes yet. And sole proprietors and independent contractors are eligible to apply. Some of the clarifications that came out just yesterday were around how do you document the payroll costs. And that's been a challenge, I know, for the banks and for the sole proprietors, because it's not simply, here's my payroll records, these are my payroll costs. It doesn't as cleanly sort of transfer for some of these businesses. So the guidance, the most recent guidance that came out last night is that we're advising the banks that even though they were not required to file their 2019 taxes, the documentation that they're going to be asked for is going to be that Schedule C document of the 2019 tax returns. So the guidance is complete that attachment, complete that Schedule C in order for the bank to have the documentation to determine what the loan amount can potentially be. If there are other payroll records that document what that net income is, or if there's other employees and you document that income, those are the records that the bank is going to need to help you determine what the loan amount can be.
Great, thank you. So another question is, once this is all over, who will verify the forgiveness? Is it the bank extending the loan or the SBA? And what does that documentation requirement look like in the end?
Right, that's an excellent question, because we know everybody wants to maximize their forgiveness. So again, remember that 75% of the loan must be used on payroll costs to maximize forgiveness. The loan forgiveness is actually going to be determined at the end of the time that they are using the proceeds. So they have, once the loan, so let me dial that back. So the bank approves the loan, and that's an automatic approval by SBA, because to streamline things, we delegated decisions on these loans to the bank on our behalf. So when the bank or credit union approves that loan, that's an approval by SBA as well. From that point forward, the bank has up to 10 days to actually disperse money, so get money out the door. And we know that is happening. So once the small business has the funds, then they're to pay up to 8 weeks of payroll costs to maximize that, to meet that 75%. Once those funds have been spent, the customer is going to need to provide documentation to the bank. They're going to determine the forgiveness portion, and they have a period of time to be determined in order to do that. So when businesses are spending those proceeds, they want to be sure they're documenting that the funds are being spent on payroll costs. If it's used for other things like rent or utilities, that's okay. Document what those proceeds are and just be wary of the ratios that I've been mentioning.
All right, let's see. What are PPP recipients to do if furloughed employees refuse to come back until the health concern is passed, or just don't respond to the call back to work?
I know we get this a lot because a lot of businesses can't even open, right? Mm-hmm. And we recognize that. But the way it's written and the way it's designed, the money has to go to payroll. So that is the guidance we've been given to people. Clearly they cannot be paid and collect unemployment. Those are certainly rules that people would want to check with the Maine Department of Labor on. But what the program is really designed for is to meet those payroll costs.
Another question, kind of backpacking on that, is can you define the payroll cost? Does that include, workers' comp and health insurance, or just the paychecks?
Sure. Yeah, there's what we're working off of is a very kind of bureaucratic looking document. It's called an interim final rule. And there are some fact sheets that are terrific on the Treasury site and the SBA site that will go into much greater detail. But in general, payroll costs are going to include like salaries, commissions, in some instances tips. It could include certain vacation time, sick leave, and certain state taxes and health and retirement benefits as well. There are some exclusions, particularly on the federal taxes, but there's a great fact sheet on the website that goes into the real specifics.
There are some questions regarding that people have applied for EIDL even after the CARES Act has went through, but they still have not heard any more information or confirmation. How long should they wait? Should they follow up? I know there's a lot of people in the queue, but some kind of reinsurance to people who have applied and haven't heard anything.
I know, and I wish I could go in there and tell you where you stand in line. My whole team does, I really do. But most importantly, I want to be sure that people are certain that they applied when they could online, when they could check that box for the EIDL loan advance. So if you know you've done that and you have a number, the only options we have available to us at this point, I'll give you the information. It's an 800 number. So 800-659-2955, or the email address to request a status update is disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. No spaces in that disaster customer service. I know we have asked, and we have asked to get some status updates. And again, it's just I know everybody's struggling and really is needing these funds and really needs to know where they stand. This has been going on a while, and it is just a really unprecedented level of demand when you start thinking about the number of businesses throughout the country that are applying and the volume. So unfortunately, that's the best answer that I have for you.
Okay. And just for, as well as everyone commenting in the chat for the links, numbers, and emails that keep getting brought up, we will send a follow-up email to everybody that was registered with all the information that Amy has been sharing with us too. So if you happen to not get down the full address or link, stay tuned and we will email that to you guys after. What are some suggestions for essential businesses that are open but some staff is unwilling to work? How do you fairly pay some for working and others not for working?
Yeah, I know. These are kind of a little out of my lane, and I am learning I need to really stay in my lane these days. This might be a good time to talk about the business resources that are available to folks in regards to technical assistance. So under the SBA umbrella, we have what we call resource partners. So the Maine Small Business Development Center, SCORE, and the Women's Business Centers at CEI. I know they're doing a lot of online workshops. They're doing a lot of one-on-one advising. They have great tips and tricks on their websites, and I can get their main websites to Katie as well. I'm sure she knows these folks because they are very active in our business community. There are other business advising entities out there affiliated with SBA microloan intermediaries. And these folks, they're providing guidance to business owners at no cost. They're doing online, Zoom one-on-one meetings. So take advantage of their services. They may have some great tips on these kinds of things, but there are really some very, in addition to the monetary stuff that business owners are dealing with, all these sort of HR kind of things are really difficult at this time. So reach out to those folks, and also through the Maine DOL website, they have a great FAQ on there as well for more technical unemployment type questions.
Yes, thank you for stating that. We do understand it's kind of hard to make sure you stay in your lane as well. So thanks for addressing that. And so people know as well, the Chamber website does have a COVID resource link. And all these resources, the Department of Labor and SCORE and everything she's mentioning are on that as well. Amy, some people are asking, when does the 8 weeks start with the PPP? Is it when they get the loan, or is it until June, or how does that work? When does that 8 weeks start?
Yeah, and in the Act, it's we're waiting for the very specific details on how to explain this, but in the Act, the way it reads is that the 8 weeks that have to be paid start when the loan is received, but then the small business has until, because you need to retain your workforce too, so that's the June 30th date. So while the funds have to be paid out, the 8 weeks starts when the loan is received. You have until June 30th to bring people back, and that's the high-level guidance at this point.
Perfect. Can you explain the difference about applying for both the EIDL and the PPP, and how you need to address that to be able to get both?
Yeah, this is a great question, because it's so many people don't want to take on debt, and I respect that, and that's really important. So when you start to think about how can you maximize what you're applying for that could be forgiven and what could be most cost affordable, you do want to be careful. So I think a lot of, once the PPP rolled out, a lot of businesses realized, and this is the case, that you want to maximize that loan for payroll. So if you think about, you've got other stuff that might be, like I mentioned, the debt payments, the utility payments, the rent, things like that, that might be more geared towards EIDL. But that being said, you still have that 75%, 25% ratio, and you can still have it forgiven. So maximize the payroll cost on the PPP program, because then those loans can be forgiven. Even if the PPP can't be forgiven, and whatever can't be forgiven and it ends up being a term loan, it's at 1%, and it is a 2-year note. So that is a favorable term. So keep that in mind, that if it can't be forgiven, that would be the term on what converts to a term note. And for the EIDL, again, that you have 6 months to decide if you want to take it, how much you want to take. You can always reduce it if you don't want to take as much as they think you're eligible for. You can get that automatic 12-month payment deferral. So those are some and the term of the payment is amortized over 30 years. So those are some very favorable terms on that. So what we've been just telling people is that you can have both, but you can't use proceeds from both to pay the same thing. So if you're using PPP for payroll costs, you can't pay payroll costs with EIDL as well. It just is a duplication that isn't allowed.
Okay. One of the questions with the EIDL for sole proprietors, if they put that they have 0 employees, does that mean that they're not eligible for any advanced grant with the $1,000 per employee? Or should, as a sole proprietor, they answer 1?
So when you're a sole proprietor, you are an employee of your business. So if you don't have other employees, yeah, that would be, you'd be the 1 employee.
And that is, just so a lot of people know too, a lot of people in the beginning it stated that it was a 10,000 advancement, but it has, the rules have kind of changed that it's $1,000 per employee. So just make sure that you guys are aware of that change as well.
Yeah, I think when it went out, it always said up to 10, but I think everybody sort of saw the 10. Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that, Katie.
Yeah. Another question, I think you touched on this a little bit, but regarding the PPP, how does a sole provider with no payroll apply? It's just showing their Schedule C, or is there anything else?
Right, that's the guidance that just came out last night is going to be whatever that tax document is, but typically it's going to be a Schedule C. So they would have to complete a Schedule C for 2019 for that payroll to be determined for them.
Let's see. If employees refuse to come back, can they use the PPP for new hires to get back to that original employee count?
I'd have to go back, and I don't know that it says that you have to retain the same people. So I don't want to give out a wrong answer, but that probably is, and I don't want to dig through my 25-page document on you. So I'll circle back with you on that one, Katie, but it really, it's tied to payroll costs, but I don't want to answer too specifically there.
Yep, so I can follow back on that. Let's see. Let me scroll through more questions. And I haven't read these advances, they're coming in through the chat. So if it is a question that's already been addressed, I'm sorry as well. We have so many questions, which is great. Let's see. So as a commission-based compensation payments, which can vary widely in terms of payment date and amounts to employees measured for qualifications as the date they are earned or only on the date they are paid. A real estate broker company, for example, may be widely varied payment dates, bunch in months or in weeks. Is there an average of payments over the year permissible to use?
So on the form, it's a very, and when I refer to the form, I'm talking about, there's one form that the applicants are all filling out. I apologize for the paper shuffle, I'm digging it out, so I use the exact words. So on the form, it's going to ask, what's the average monthly payroll? So the business would put together, and there's some calculations in the interim final rule, like examples that really outline this. So you'd accumulate what those payroll costs were for an entire year, divide by 12, and then that's going to be how you're going to determine what your average monthly payroll is. And then that is multiplied by 2.5 to equal the loan amount for the PPP.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so I think I have gone through everyone's questions. If it hasn't been addressed, why don't you put it again in the chat if it got lost in the chat. So I don't see any other questions coming in. Oh, hold on, here they come. Let's see. Laid off employees may do much better with the unemployment with the 600 advancement. That seems like a real disincentive to bring them back with PPP, especially for jobs that have no work and employees. What would be staying home? So any advice for that kind of side of stuff, that, you know, some employees are kind of better off with that unemployment side?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's about that relationship with the employees, and it's about, you know, face it, people are going to make their own personal decision. You know, when I've heard this question answered by others, they talk about, you know, employees want to work. Before this all kind of started, we were at, you know, more than full employment, and you know, businesses are probably going to be focused on how do you retain that workforce. So you want to find a way to pay these people to retain them so they will come back. And, you know, I know there's some kind of a extra benefit to unemployment now, and I do not profess to be an expert on that, but that's short-lived. So while it may be, you know, a short-term decision, you know, hopefully employees are going to be looking at the long-term and realizing, you know, people want to work, and that's going to be, again, hopefully something that businesses can handle.
Another question is, can farmers apply for either the EIDL or the PPP?
Great question. Under the economic injury disaster loan, I didn't talk about who could not apply, but one of the exclusions there is ag producers. So businesses that grow things are not eligible for EIDL. That's the way the program is designed. That is not the case with the PPP. That's a different program, so that isn't applicable there. And when I say ag producers, I'm talking about strictly the production piece of things. And that becomes from, there may be other federal programs out there through USDA or FSA that might cover these things. So typically, you know, the government doesn't want to duplicate things. But if that ag producer has other lines of business like a retail store or wholesale or things like that, that those lines of business could potentially qualify for EIDL.
Another question is, I applied for the EIDL after the CARES Act came out. It was a simple application that did not ask for any additional materials. Will there be more to the component, more to the application, or is she missing a component?
Yeah, as that evolved, the EIDL application, it got very streamlined. It was strictly filling out some boxes online. Through the closing process, there'll be some verification, but they will clearly spell out to you what documents they need for that. It's really going to just be, you know, documenting that you were a business, documenting, you know, records and things like that.
Is the June 30th date strictly for the head count, or also the disbursement of the 75% of the PPP funds?
So the funds have to go out for the 8 weeks of payroll, and then the people have to get back on board by the 30th, and those are not tied together.
Can the 25% of the PPP grant to an LLC be used to pay rent to a second LLC that is owned by the same person?
If you have, a lot of times people will set up an eligible passive type entity just to own the real estate. There's legal and tax ramifications for doing that. So if it is a legitimate rent expense, you have a lease and you're paying rent regularly, those are the documents that you would want to have to be able to support that it is a rent payment.
Another question, as I read the PPP, it's not much help to new businesses because the amount loaned is based on the last 12 months of operations. They started their business in February. Any suggestions on help for them?
Yeah, so I've had a couple, and one poor business, he started like right after the 20th even. So I mean, right before the 20th. So he didn't meet the cutoff, and that, you know, is really definitely unfortunate. The only thing we can say, I mean, that's the way the program is designed right now. But the only other thing is initially the guidance we were trying to give businesses before these programs even became available is if you have debt, talk to your lender, talk to your vendors, to people like that, to see if they can provide you with some payment relief to give you some extra breathing room. And again, these might be some businesses that could potentially benefit from working with SBDC School or the Women's Business Center too.
When you get your EIDL offer, how do you decline the portion of the loan that is above the grant advance of those $1,000 per employee?
Yeah, once they reach out to you, it'll be a clear communication channel, and you make that ultimately that determination. SBA can't make you borrow more than what you want to borrow. So you can just make that clear to them when they connect with you.
So there's been a couple questions about the clarification about what's considered part of payroll. Is health, dental, or life insurance considered part of that?
So it does talk about in the guidelines benefits. So yes, those all would be, talks about healthcare and retirement insurance. So those are benefits. So that's part of that.
Let's see. And isn't it true that employees who receive a call back to work do not have an option of receiving further unemployment from that date?
That's a great question for the DOL. Sorry, I'm
Okay.
not familiar with that.
Yep, and I think the next question will be the same. How do you notify the unemployment office if they refuse to come back to work?
Yeah, I would say I haven't checked in a long time, but last I knew, and DECD was sharing this widely, but there was a terrific FAQ on their website. So I bet there's these answers to these questions are right there.
Okay. One more question. Let's see. Can't somebody just take what they offer, then if you don't use it, just give it back? Are there prepayment penalties on this?
So if we're talking about EIDL, yes, you don't have to take more than you want to borrow on that. Or if you want to only take, the up to 10,000 forgivable piece on EIDL, that's an option too. There are no prepayment penalties on EIDL, and on the same on the PPP. There are no prepayment penalties, no fees whatsoever that are charged to the borrower.
Perfect. All right, so I think I'm up to date on all questions again. We do have a couple more minutes. Does anybody have any other questions? We have a lot of thank yous, and I will, second that, Amy. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer a lot of these questions and to address the concerns that people have. We know that you guys have been busy, and we cannot even imagine how many hours your whole team and your staff is working. So thank you for the great information and covering so many questions and getting this information out to our membership for sure. We will, again, just to mention, we will be sending out an email with all these links that were mentioned. And we will, I think, definitely based off a lot of our questions into, I think it'd be great to have somebody of Department of Labor to come in and speak on this as well and answer some questions. So stay tuned for that. We'll try to get that out to you guys. So thank you again, Amy. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I would like to mention that next Wednesday, April 22nd at 10, we will have Eric German, who's the president of Cross Benefit Solution, to talk about employee benefits during this time. A lot of information, what to do with your staff as going, part-time or furloughing. So he will be here to answer your questions and give you a kind of overview of what's going on in that world of things. Let's see. Oh, I had a question pop up. Oh, yes. I will follow up with anybody who submitted a question and we didn't have the answer. We will get you those for sure. Please reach out to the chamber if you guys need anything during this time. And if you guys have other questions that are lingering and you would like some help from other different organizations, from SCORE or any of the groups that we've talked about, please let us know. We'll try to get people to come in and talk to you guys. So again, thank you so much. We will be emailing this recorded version out to you guys too, so feel free to share that out to people that you have been talking to that might have some questions. Amy, before I close, any other thing that you would like to mention?
I just want to thank you, Katie, for helping us get out the correct information. We have heard that there are some scams out there. So if anybody is contacted by someone claiming to be SBA and they're claiming to help you apply for anything, that's not us. So, let us know though. Give our office a call if you get any of these kind of scam inquiries. We have received some calls that they are going on out there. So just know that there's no cost to applying for any of these things. And if you do get a call from somebody that says you have to pay, let us know, because that is not accurate. And so thank you, Katie.
Yes, thank you, Amy. Yes, that's a good note. Yeah, I've heard unfortunately, a lot of scams going on. So yeah, please verify with us, and we can verify by the different groups that are reaching out to you too, if it is a scam or what's been going on. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Amy, again, and your whole team and your whole staff. And hopefully you guys can join us next Wednesday. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And talk to you soon. Thanks.